Chapter 3. Return to the monastery. I had another 4 years of idyllic life in Darek after that first encounter with the Chinese, but now I can hardly remember them. They have been displaced by memories of the 3 years I spent at the monastery, which are still very present to me when I seek them out. Not that I do very often. I have long ago learned to focus my mind in the present moment and leave any discomfort in the past where it belongs. During the first half of my life, I was deeply resentful whenever I thought about being taken to Dolmalakan and left there at the age of 12. The place was a prison for me. Even after I left it far behind, I hugged my anger and resentment close to me. In that way I recreated its stone walls and its punishing regime within my own mind. I may have refused to study in preparation for it, or even to think about what awaited me, but the day inevitably arrived when Rinpoche sent for me. All my denial came to an end when my father opened that letter. Once again he and I set off for Dolmalakan on horseback. I had virtually no belongings to take with me besides the clothes I wore, a couple of blankets, and my little silver food bowl. The Mongolian hat I so treasured was now too small for me, and I left it behind. I do not remember my mother's final hug for me, though it must have been even longer and warmer than usual, since we both assumed it would be the last one for many years. In the normal way of things, I would have come home for Losal at some point, perhaps not for 3 or 4 years, but before too long. The monastery's inhabitants sometimes return to visit their families at Tibetan New Year, in the same way that people in the West go home for Christmas. That didn't come to pass. All of normal life was wiped out when the Chinese invaded Tibet in 1959, 3 years into my time at the monastery. I did not return to my village during those 3 years, and then I was forced to flee to safety by the invasion. So I never saw my mother again. After that day, when she waved my father and me off, I used to wish I could remember our last hug, but I have accepted that I cannot. The journey was leaden with my foreboding. I didn't want to go, but there was absolutely no way I could not. It was unthinkable that any Tibetan child would defy his or her parents' wishes. In addition, there was the will of my brother, Akon Rinpoche, which was even more resolute and even more impossible to ignore. My life's path was set, or so I thought. I would become a monk and spend the rest of my days in the monastery. I could see life stretching out in front of me in a grim and unchanging vista. Ironically, in hindsight, since it would be only 3 short years before the Chinese invasion would destroy this way of life, along with everything else. Even if the Chinese hadn't come, At some point, I would have learned that, in fact, nothing lasts forever. This key insight of Buddhism is summed up in the Buddha's famous aphorism, "This too shall pass." Darek was over. My childhood had come to a close. But it didn't occur to me that this might support an understanding of impermanence. I was a child, and heavy with the melodrama of children. I felt very unfairly treated, not to say doomed. The first night I spent in Dolmalakan, I could barely summon enough grace to be polite to my brother's tutor, or any of the monks, or the servants. I certainly had no positive feelings towards Akon Rinpoche, who was 16 on the day when we finally met. He received me kindly, but with no brotherly warmth. Our relationship was purely one of teacher and pupil. He was a person who felt a deep sense of duty to the community of which he was a head, and the ideal of bodhisattva that he literally embodied. He saw his role as being to provide guidance to the Sangha and the lay people who looked to him. Akon Rinpoche was not an emotionally effusive person, but he had deep compassion. This was a strange mixture for Westerners who are raised to place a lot of faith in the validity of their emotional life and in displays of emotion. He often came across as immovable, like a mountain. But as I grew to appreciate, there was an infinite wellspring of loving kindness and compassion within him. My brother was then, and continued to be throughout my life, a steady and compassionate force, always acting in my best interests. But on the day he received me, and for years after, there was no sign of special regard, and certainly no physical affection. I had not expected it, since I knew it was not his role to provide it. Even so, I couldn't help blaming Akon for removing me from Darek. My resentment of him dug its strong roots into my heart on the first day, and flourished there for decades. The great consolation of my time at Dolmalakan was another brother, whom I met on the same day I met Akon Rinpoche. Jamyang, my eldest brother, had been ordained as a monk before my birth, and lived during my early childhood at Rinpoche Monastery. Not long after Akon Rinpoche was enthroned as abbot at Dolmalakan, aged 4, Jamyang's abbot sent him to support his younger brother. It was Jamyang who was kind to me during those first bewildering days at Dolmalakan. It was Jamyang who consoled me when I was upset at my father's departure, 2 weeks after he brought me. My father was stoical, since all of this was simply the way things worked. But when he left, I felt that my last link with the safe and secure world of Darek was disappearing out of sight. Rising and falling on his trotting horse until he was a vanished speck out on the cold, gray plains. Continuing with Lama Yeshe Losal Rinpoche's From a Mountain in Tibet, starting on page 26. That was a very powerful moment, I thought, when it described him leaving his mother, really.
Yeah, Aye.
Because so many of us say goodbye to our parents without knowing we're saying goodbye to them. And later we think, if we had only known.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for those of us who aren't there when our parents die,
Yeah.
there is always that thought.
Yeah.
What was that last moment that we
Yeah.
had together?
Yeah. But it could have been, might have been meant to be like that, so we didn't have this problem of not wanting to leave. You know, maybe it was planned that way. You know.
You mean the death of the parent would go more smoothly if the child hadn't known
Yeah.
that the last goodbye was the last goodbye?
Yeah. It might have been a purpose.
Yes.
For that to happen.
Yes. I think, too, with the mothers, they might be taken for granted until they're gone.
Yeah,
and then the appreciation just comes.
Yeah.
And we think, oh, if only I had known.
Maybe cut out the breakdown and crying when these things happen.
That's right.
You know, so they didn't want that to happen, so that's how I think it was done that way.
That's right. And she waved them off.
Aye.
And some of us have that memory of being waved off by our mothers and it having been the last time that we have seen
right.
them, in this lifetime anyway.
Yes. So that would happen very, very, very quickly, and that would give the mother a chance to dive in and dry her tears.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, all things are done for our mothers.
Yeah.
So all mothers throughout time and space, all sentient beings.
All beings were mothers throughout space.
We dedicate all of our forward movement towards liberation to all mother sentient beings.
Om Mani Padme Hum.
Om Mani Padme Hum.
Om Tari Tari Turi Soha.
Om Tari Tari Turi Soha.
Om Ahung Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hung.
Om Ahung Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hung. And we will be reunited again, won't we?
Aye.
With our mothers.
And may all be auspicious.
And may it all be auspicious.
I can understand why he was upset when to Dharma's Rokong, because nothing turns out the way he wanted to be. It was all completely lost the way he wanted to be, and it wasn't like that, you know. And I can see why he said a wee bit of resentment for that, you know. That's understandable. And well, I'm sure when he got there he had to learn his lessons then.
Yes.
Yes.
It was a monastery, and monasteries were very strict and very organized.
And disciplined.
Disciplined.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most of the practice is textually based, isn't it? You have to read along with the text.
That's right. Yes. No, it's right. His first visit, he went to Dharma Longkha when he was 10 years of age. Then he was brought back. So that was 2 years before he went back again. Because he was 12 when he went back again.
That's right.
And so things must have changed and took place then, you know.
The first visit was supposed to be a meeting.
Yeah.
But because Akron Rinpoche wasn't there...
I know, that's right, I remember that. But that's why he must have postponed it, because he waited 2 years before.
2 years. He was when he was young. He was told he would go when he was 12.
Yeah.
And the earlier visit was just an introduction.
Yeah. Oh well.
That didn't happen.
It didn't happen that way, did it? It did not.
And then when they did finally meet each other, it was actually on Akron Rinpoche's 16th birthday.
That's right.
Which is quite incredible.
Yeah. It's 12. Yeah. That's 4 years the difference between their age.
That's right.
4 years the difference. and well, I'm sure he had to learn all his lessons then.
Yes.
Yeah, he wasn't going to get away with it this time.
We're going to be learning all about it in the book, aren't we? Because this is probably all that will come next to that time at Dol
That's
Malakan.
right. And I know the first time he was nervous about crossing the river, but I don't know what happened with the river this time, because he never mentioned it this time.
That's correct.
Yes, passing across the river. He got tied on. So he might have been old enough to ride a horse by then the second time, you know.
They also weren't traveling with so many yak, so it would have been quite a different experience, don't you think?
That's right, yeah.
When they had a big herd of yak coming along,
it
would be a different experience.
Yeah, that's for carrying all the goods.
That's right.
For exchange, yeah.
But the second time his father didn't have anything to trade.
No.
So it was just a
opportunity
for his father to meet with Akam too, because actually, that was a meeting between father and son as well.
That's right.
And that father and son didn't know each other very well when you think about Akam Rinpoche being taken away from the family when he was 2.
Yeah, but anyway, this meeting had to happen, had to take place, you know. It was very important for that to happen.